Hi everybody, my name is Kira Derryberry and I am a commercial and family portrait photographer based in Tallahassee, Florida. Now we all know that 2020 was a dumpster fire and as a result a lot of us had to modify and pivot the way that we do things. Now I do a lot of commercial work here in the city. I do a lot of magazine covers, headshots primarily for large companies, law firms, medical industry. I have a lot of that going on throughout the year. Now, when COVID-19 hit, we all know that the photography industry took a hit. Not being able to do large group portraits for weddings or events, and for me anyway, for commercial work, was pretty devastating. One of the plus sides, though, of everybody having to start to work from home was there became like kind of a boom in people who needed new professional portraits. But with that boom came companies who were redoing their brands, redoing their websites, redoing all their marketing materials, and realizing that they needed to get some new group portraits of their companies out. Now, how do we do that when we can't have people in masks shoulder to shoulder in a group portrait? We can't unmask them and put them shoulder to shoulder in a group portrait. So I had to pretty much pivot completely in the studio and do something that I wasn't intensely comfortable with at the time, but ever since 2020, I have really upped my game here. So today what I'm going to show you is how to create socially distanced group portraits by way of composite. I have a few case studies that I'm going to show you about how we did that today, and I'm going to show you a little bit of behind the scenes here in the studio for how we did one of our latest shoots, and I hope that it's helpful for you so it's something that you can maybe add to what you're already doing. You know, we don't know how long that we are going to have to be being cautious when we have large groups of people together, and so I think this is invaluable to add to your tool bag, the ability to photograph a large group, get them together in a portrait without them actually having to be together. So I hope this is helpful for you today. And Jimmy and Dana run a law firm here in Tallahassee, and Jimmy and Dana have their faces all over billboards, all over park benches, all over buses. They are constantly refreshing their advertising, which is great for someone like us, right? The benefit to having these shots so that they can be composited later for this particular client, and I'm sure for clients that you can think of like this, is that because they're constantly refreshing their advertising, I can offer them a number of combinations to create a new look for them without them having to come in here and do a whole new shoot. So when we do these shoots, Jimmy and Dana will come in, and maybe some of the other lawyers in the law firm will come in, and they'll bring in a couple of different outfits. We shoot them standing, seated, facing left, facing right, all over the place. And then I have all of these individual shots of them that I have as kind of like a bank of images that I can choose from, and I'll show you that in just a second. I also want to show you this other image. Now this is from the same shoot as that last one where Dana went and changed. Now you can see that this particular client really loves this pose. She has a few poses that she considers more signature, and so I try to make sure that we get those every time. But all of these women were photographed. This was in the middle of 2020, so obviously we were practicing social distancing, and all of these women were photographed individually in the studio. Now, I wanted to point out a couple of things about the lighting pattern here. You can see that I am using a very, very soft light. I find that that is beneficial for a couple of reasons. One, it's very flattering to a lot of the women that I'm photographing in the studio. You know, even if I'd like to use something like a little punchier, a little stronger, I find that starting out with something a little more neutral allows me to add the punch back in if I want to. But two, if, for example, I needed to flip any one of these individuals to make them work. Like if I needed to flip Rose the other direction because maybe I was going to put her on the end over here and I needed Rose turned the different direction so that the whole composite worked better visually, I could, because the lighting direction that's falling across them isn't particularly strong. I know we can see that there is a camera right to left lighting pattern that's coming in here where the shadows are coming in a little bit on this camera left side, but because it's soft, it's not going to be super, super noticeable if I need to flip Rose. So if I had really punchy light in here with strong shadows, if I needed to flip Rose, then visually the composite would not be believable. And what makes a composite work is that believability factor, right? So the other thing that I wanted to point out as far as believability goes is remember certain elements that have to be here. So if you're on a white background, we have to have some floor shadows if we're going to see the feet, right? If we don't have floor shadows, then they are going to look like they're floating. So we don't want them to look like they're just like lost in a void somewhere. So we definitely have to have floor shadows. Your floor shadows need to match the style and type of lighting that you have applied. So if it's going to be more of a a soft light look like we have here, then the shadows should be very, very faint, okay? Very, very faint. You can even see there's going to be a little shadow play under her camera right foot, but it's going to be a stronger shadow that's being cast from the camera left foot over here, because that's actually the direction that the light is falling the strongest, okay? So just make sure that your shadows are believable and that you're not like soft lighting an image and then putting hard shadows, hard bold shadows in the floor. All right. Seating combinations are also something that is really nice and beneficial. You know, they have a lot of media that is very strongly horizontal or narrow horizontal images. And so having images where we can have them seated is very beneficial. They've got places for text across the top, on the left or right. That's kind of the benefit of having that neutral background in the back behind here. When you're doing seated images, make sure that the perspective makes sense, okay? So you can kind of see that we need to be able to see that one chair is behind the other one, okay? So it would naturally fall higher. If she's going to be seated behind her like this, then it wouldn't be even with the floor right here. So make sure that some of those things visually make sense. Same goes for here, right? We're kind of jumbling up chairs as we get here, but the perspective makes sense, okay? Make sure when you're shooting these that your camera position is locked in, okay? You don't want to suddenly shoot somebody from a higher camera angle with the plan that you're going to be doing a composite, because that would totally blow your perspective, right? Okay. So let's move on. I'm going to show you some of the behind the scenes images, like just the raw images that we shot from that last shoot. You can see that I photographed, because I know that a lot of these are going to be on a white background. I went ahead and shot these on a white background. So you can see I use a seamless paper. You know, a lot of photographers also, when they're shooting for composite, they'll shoot on green screen or they'll shoot on gray. I have done both. I sometimes shoot on green screen. I find that I don't like to have to clean up the green color cast that sometimes bounces back onto people. And there's lots of actions. I know my friend Ben Shirk makes an amazing action set to clean it up, but I just saved myself that step. I know that this client is never going to want to be on anything other than white. So I went ahead and photographed them on white. And it kind of makes the compositing process a little bit easier too. But just kind of going through, you can see that we've photographed her in a number of different poses, okay? And all of these are set up on a tripod so that we will be able to photograph everybody else differently. Because we've been shooting tethered, the clients are actually able to make their selections while they're there. That is extremely helpful, right? Because then that means I can get right to work when I am done with this. So with the client being able to go through and make their selections, I already had a list of images that they had approved for use. I find that it is good to make sure that you have shot a lot of different looks and poses for the client, but that also you have encouraged them to choose many different poses, okay? Try not to get too many that look exactly the same. You know, it happens every once in a while where they choose two. She's like, oh, I like my chin up slightly more than where my chin is down slightly. But just be careful not to get too many that are identical, because you want to be able to have different options when they're in this, when you're trying to composite the images together, okay? So once I have our selections, I can go through, retouch them, and then have them cut out as PNGs. Now you can cut these out yourself. If you struggle with that, like I know a lot of people do, I also use a company called ReTouchUp. Often I will send a bunch of my corporate work out that I know needs to be cut out, that I don't want to sit here and process myself, and I will send it out and they will have it done in like a few hours. So in this case, that is one of those times where I just sent this out to ReTouchUp and I said, please cut these out for me. And they said, no problem. And they cut them out for me. And I don't feel bad about it at all. Okay, so I have a number of images of all of the women that we photographed and Jimmy. It was like all women and this one guy. So if we wanted to combine some of these images together, let's say I'm going to do like maybe a standard seating. So let's pick out this one. So now that I've got her open in Photoshop, notice that she's all in a transparent background. I am just going to select all and copy. And then I'm going to get her over here into here, and she's huge. So we'll just do a little free transform. That is Command T. Okay. It's kind of my favorite way to just quickly resize somebody. Command T and keeping, now it used to be that you hit Shift and that was how you kept the proportions, and then one day in an update recently they took that out. So now you don't hold anything, you just drag from the corner and it keeps the proportions correct. If you hit Shift, it like throws them out of whack. Okay. All right, so we're gonna get her where she needs to go ish. And we can always play with the sizing on this as well. And sometimes when, I've got this like void, I like to create a horizon line as well. So I kind of have something to anchor her on. I'm just going to nudge her down just a little bit. Trying to use her foot as kind of my guide and she might be a little bit crooked. Let's see. There we go. Okay. All right. So let's find somebody else to throw in this image with her. Yes, I know. All right. So maybe let's get a standing image of Dana to combine here. Now she's facing this way, so maybe it would be good if Dana was facing out. Do I have one this direction? Yeah, she's kind of turning her shoulder here. So let's pull Dana. Okay. And let's get back over here where she is big and just size her down real quick. Again, we can make, this is all just a rough estimate, but we can start to make that work. Now, Dana's a tall woman, and Jimmy isn't. So he's not a woman at all, in fact, but he's not tall. So it's often we're trying to sort of make those proportions work as well, where, because it's a composite image, we can sort of cheat that and make him look a little bit taller, which is nice. All right, so let's say that Dana is going to be in front because she's the principal player. Remember that when you're coming up with your placement, okay, that, your prominent people that are supposed to be showing up more important. Obviously, we think about that when we're posing people in a group, but that also comes into play when you are doing a composite, and you have much more control over that here, which is fantastic. So let's kind of move her right there, okay? And let's go find something of Jimmy maybe. So Dana was facing out that way. I'm going to definitely want to have him stand, right? Okay. Okay. And let's play here. Another thing I'll say while I'm sizing him down, when you're photographing bald men on a white background, it is real easy to overlight their head. With Jimmy here, I would say that this looks okay. I'm not super pleased with how lit the back of his head is. I'll show you. But, there are other ways in studio when you're photographing. You don't want to really change the lighting between people, obviously, when you're photographing, to create the composite. You don't want to make a lot of changes and make variables, but it is okay to maybe flag the background, or even if we wanted to, we could photograph Jimmy on an unlit white background so that there isn't any bounce that, starts to hit him in the back of the head. Just a little trick. I almost always, like if I'm shooting on a darker background, I turn off my kicker lights when we are working with men. All right, so see, the issue is if we make him too tall, his feet look enormous, right? So he's got to be like, a little bit shorter than her, and without making him look way too small. Okay. All right, good. Now, I kind of don't love his arm, so I'm going to put him behind her. And again, we are going to worry about shadows here in a minute, but we can sort of get him where he needs to go ish. Okay. All right. Let's find maybe another seated person to balance this out. Maybe it's a team of 4. Let's see. Let's go back to bridge here and see if we have got, do I have any other seated? Oh yeah, I've got Cami here seated. So, she is sitting outward. We used one of those. Okay. So let's use maybe this one, right? Okay. And I'll go ahead and put her on the top, but I may move her around a little bit. Now, the other thing is I've already retouched all of these. Okay. So I find that is helpful. Just go ahead and get your bank of images ready from your client, the choices. Make sure they're purchasing all these images. Okay. Because you don't want to just, I usually hand them over these images with the purchase. But make sure they have bought them, that you're not just dumping a bunch of images at them for one, for the price of one. But then I go ahead and retouch them because like I said, I don't want to be worried about retouching at this point. When I'm just creating the image, all I want to worry about at this point is, arranging and doing the composite. So let's see here. So we want to kind of get that chair even with the chair on the other side. And she's sitting up taller, so naturally she would be a little taller. But let me see. She might be a little... Sometimes what I